Have you ever wondered how chess grandmasters manage to play at 95% accuracy consistently? Well, that's basically the way that you win most of the games because at some point your opponent is going to fall apart. That's basically the promise of playing perfect chess. Playing chess perfectly is a draw, but if your opponent makes a mistake, you're already winning. So today we are going to have the first part of the series of playing at 95% accuracy. And in this series, you're going to learn how you can do it too. So first of all, let's see the opening. It started with e4. I was having the black pieces here, and today we're going to have a look at two games. But I was having the black pieces here, and I decided to go for the Sicilian defense. Back in the day, I used to play the Caro-Kann, and that was a very good opening. It brought me very far. But nowadays, I like to go for the Sicilian because it's more combative. It is more complicated, but since it's more combative, you can sort of get the win more consistently, and that's the idea. So my opponent here goes for a risky line, the Smith Mora, and here he gives up a pawn for development. You can see his knight is already out. There's a bunch of space here that he can develop his pieces to. Holy, my arrows are bad. But you see, I'm already kind of prepared in the opening. I play d6 to free up my bishop, and the idea is you bring the knight out, you play d6, and what I like to do here when they develop the bishop, I like to play this move e6 because it shuts down the diagonal. Because what sometimes happen, you develop the knight, and they develop the knight, and here a very common mistake is bishop to g4. What happens? We have sacrifice, and then they have this check. Either knight g5 and collect, or even something like queen to b3 check, but this is not as good. So knight g5, if you go forward, they're going to collect the bishop like this. If you go backward, it's the same thing, and that's how you lose. So you do not want to go for that. What I like to play here is e6. And the reason I play e6 is, again, I shut off the diagonal, and now in the Smith-Morra gambit, the idea is to sort of pin you and then try to break it down the middle. So I decided to push, simply because pushing this allows e5 in the future, so he cannot pin me, and then push. Because what sometimes happens is you develop, they go here, and you just castle, and you think nothing of it. But now they just push, and after you play knight to e8, they're going to take, and you can see this whole space here is right open, and they're going to storm you with an attack. So even after you take, something like bishop to f4 is going to be quite annoying, and from here on, the winning percentage for white is very huge. The most common move by black here is apparently queen to c7 by the database, and the win percent and the win ratio here is something like 80%. So it's quite huge, and that's why you do not want to fall for that. So I decide to push, and here there are some lines where they can sacrifice here, so they cannot take. So you need to castle. And here the opponent can either take, which my opponent did not do. My opponent instead, after something like this, he decides to push, and I castle, and he doesn't take. Again, either bishop to e3 or take, both are fine moves. Bishop to e3 is slightly better because if they take here, this is going to be quite a decent square for me to protect because the knight cannot jump in afterwards. But here, they did not develop, and instead they jumped in with the knight right away. So I jump in here and attack the queen. Wait, it went a little fast. So I jump in here, attack the queen, and attack the bishop at the same time. Very good move. And after this mistake, I was only slightly winning. I was like 0.7, 0.8 if I look at the engine right now, and it's saying that I'm slightly winning, but it's not game ending. But converting advantages like this is the way you're going to move. So this is out of the opening. This was the opening for the first game, and you can see I came well prepared. My opponent did a slight mistake going into the middle game, and you need to capitalize on that, okay? Pattern recognition, very important. So of course, doing puzzles is going to allow you to learn such things, and if you're a beginner, you don't really need to worry about this. What you need to do is make less blunders than your opponent. That's basically the art of chess. This is basically the same thing at high level. So if your opponent blunders his queen, you should not blunder your queen. That's basically the idea. In this, a more advanced level of chess is uh, your opponent makes a bad move, you don't make a bad move. So that's basically how you do it. So I jump in, he needs to protect the bishop, and now I take. And you can see this pawn right here is kind of going to be quite bad. Why? First of all, I'm going to be able to push f5 now, and that's going to start an attack towards his opponent's king, and that's not what whites want, but what wants. But first, I decide to kick out the bishop. The bishop goes back, and here I decide to trade. Okay, I was maybe thinking about playing b5 here. To be honest, this is quite good. But after he goes back, I would not have taken. I would either have played something like this. Again, nothing would have changed. But this is basically what happened in another order. But I did not play b5. So I decided to trade over here. And again, this idea with f4, where I decide to attack the rook because always going into the middle game and the end game, and especially in the opening, always try to find out what your opponent is trying to do. So my opponent did a move. You can see it's marked as an inaccuracy, but of course I do not see that while it's in a game, right? So I think, okay, maybe it's a good move. And then I analyze it and I look, okay, he's obviously trying to go here to start a counter attack. And what I'm going to do, how can I stop him going to this square? Okay, I can play h5, and that's going to prevent him. But I think f5 is going to be way better, simply because I'm attacking him at the same time, so I gain a tempo, and this square is now covered. So my opponent goes back, I decide to push again, attacking him. And here my opponent does not go here because it blunders the rook. And if he goes here, I would still have pushed. You can see by the engine as well. But what happens? He goes back, I push. And if, in case you wonder after... Wait, let's go back. In case you wonder, the line the engine gives here after push, because you think, okay, he goes here. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter because if he takes, you're going to take like this, completely take everything, and your opponent is really going to struggle. You see, this fork would even be quite beautiful, but that is not really on the line yet. But you have to look. You have to calculate. Knight to h4 looks quite juicy, but then the opponent drops forward. You can also just keep the knight there. You can kick out the bishop first, and after he goes back, what you can do is maybe you infiltrate with the rook, but at least you opened it up. What you can also do is play something like rook to e8 to try to push e4 in the future, but these are all different lines. Let's see what the engine actually says it's the top move. Okay, so I said something like this. If the if the king drops forward, of course check and collect, and you win the game. Very beautiful aspect. So yeah, that's what would have happened. And you can see attacks like this, storming your opponent's king. Of course, this was not the best play by my opponent, but of course, playing at 98% accuracy in this game over 40 moves, 39 to be precise, is quite the good delivery. And what you need to do is, okay, I decide to go for this line. He protects this, and I first decide to attack the bishop because attacking the bishop opens this up. And what I can do is, first of all, okay, I cannot lift my rook yet, but maybe I can capture in the future and weaken his pawn structure. But first, what I decided to do is jump in a knight with a check. And the first thing you look at when you are in this position is maybe a knight sacrifice. So if he goes here, sacrificing the knight looks quite juicy. Yes, you do realize quite quickly that is not really working, which is a sad thing. But maybe you can compensate if your opponent is not there in time, which he isn't really doing, right? So this is not a bad position for you at all. And you can see Stockfish agrees with me. Lifting the rook in this position would be quite good. But my opponent went here. And here I was like, okay, this doesn't really work anymore. I don't really have anything, right? He's just going to go here, and if I ask the engine, white is better. So don't do that. Always calculate your things out. So I decide to play h5 here. h5 is not the best answer, apparently. I should have brought the rook up, but h5 is not completely hated by the engine. Why? Because I'm poking at the structure right here, and this is basically how I start an attack. Very important, when you start an attack, or you are trying to improve your attack, move your pieces towards your opponent's king. Now, my opponent apparently should go here and try to trade it off. What I would do after something like this is a capture, and of course, this is just hanging, so they would have to go here. But after something like this, you even look at something like takes, and push. which can be sometimes good, but in this position it doesn't really work either. A good thing is that you can play this, but are you really doing anything, right? You cannot protect the pawn, and that is a problem. So, of course, if you had captured the knight in this line, yes, you would promote and you would be winning, but that does not happen, okay? So, what my opponent did instead is they pushed. And I decide to go in here. The problem with pushing is that now I have one more square for attack. And here my opponent is trying to poke at my structure, sort of trying to take the pieces away from the attack. And if he actually stabilizes like this, you can see Stockfish actually says, okay, you are slightly winning, Stefan, -1, but it's not really that good anymore, okay? So instead, I do not waste any time here. I decide to push, attack the queen, because what was I looking at? How did I come up with this move? I was looking at this because it would have been a really beautiful infiltration. He cannot take because I go here. And also another thing is, if he does nothing, I'm going to deliver checkmate like this. This was basically my idea. But the problem with that move is that he instantly captures. And after this, you are not good anymore. You are not in a good position, okay? So that's what I saw. And that's why I decided, okay, I can protect this pawn first. And then I can go here. And my opponent needs to move, and you can see I'm quite winning. So my opponent decides to sacrifice everything, and from here on I was completely winning. So to break it down for you, have a good opening repertoire, because my opening repertoire helped me. And okay, I was having checkmate in 2 right here. So that's why my opponent resigned, but this is basically how the game ended. So you see, I was well prepared out of the opening, and I knew what to do, and I capitalized on my opponent's mistakes. Of course, I understand that is not always easy, and that is quite some difficult thing to do. But that's what I'm trying to teach you in this series, how you can capitalize on your opponent's mistakes. And what was the mistake of my opponent in this specific game? Well, in this specific game, my opponent gave me a weakness to fight for. This pawn is kind of a pawn that can be captured in the future. It's not easy, but also it frees up this square, which was very, very crucial for the attack, you see. But now let's have a look at the second game. This game was played at 98% accuracy, and the second game is played at 96% accuracy. It has a few less moves, it has 29 instead of 39, but my opponent starts with d4. I developed a knight, and after something like this is the opening that I always like to play. Why do I like to play this? So usually I do something like this, and I try to play c5 here. This is somewhat called the Rubinstein system simply because of this white structure as well. But this move c5 right here is trying to double the pawn structure, and at the same time I could castle, and I could not even care about this pawn right now because you can see they cannot even protect it that well. They cannot really hang on to the pawn. I just developed my knight, they move back, and at some time I'm going to be able to capture. So you poke at the pawn structure, and even if they push right here, that is not really as good after something like takes. Yes, that is slightly better, but they are still in this pin. They have to play something like this, and you can see the pawn structure is quite lacking, and you don't really have to compensate that much. You're going to develop your bishop, develop your knight, and that's the way you're going to capitalize on it, right? So this is what I played. I get attacked. So I decide to capture, and now capture right here, and then I castled. So my opponent fianchettos the bishop. Fianchettoing the bishop in this position, you can see this diagonal can be quite weak, so I decide to play for d5, simply because after something like takes, this square is protected well enough, and and after he takes, if he takes, you can see this is not going to be a problem. This diagonal is sort of looked for. So that was my idea after developing the knight, and you can see he captured, and here I decided to go for e5. Why did I decide to go for e5? Because I saw after takes, this pawn structure is not really that bad. I can develop my bishop both ways, depending on where I want to place it, and I can maybe play for something like this. Even though now quite some weakness. If you ask Stockfish here, white is still slightly better, but I did win this game since I played at 96% accuracy. What happened here is, okay, I have this pawn structure. He can play for these two pawns, so it can be quite dangerous. but my opponent did not play perfectly. So I decided to go. He did not take here, so I decided to go rook to e8. And after something like this, I simply developed a bishop, and I decided to go for a bishop trade. So I trade the bishops like this. Here I saw, yes, he can push here, but I was like, okay, this sort of weakens this diagonal for quite some time, so I just drop back. If he pushes again, I can push here, and then I sort of have a breakthrough. After something like capture, okay, maybe he's slightly better, so it is quite interesting. But as well, you could also go back here, and it wouldn't really be a problem. And yeah, it is quite controversial. But after something like this, I argue you are better, and Stockfish agrees with me as well. So here, apparently after push, okay, Stockfish says to jump in with the knight. The bishop is not as accurate, but this is also quite beautiful. So again, I would have jumped in with the bishop, but again, I see takes is quite sketchy. Yeah. So here capturing leads to a very difficult position, which I sort of missed in the game. I must have. Okay, so after this, what I decide to do is, okay, I stabilize my position. Here it's equal. And you can see this is a classic mistake that my opponent did at 2240. This is a 2240 rated opponent on leeches, and my opponent fell for a fork. So this is a game that, yes, it is not the best 95% accuracy win, but you still have to convert it, right? You are a +2 material, and yes, it's not the hardest way to do and the hardest thing to do, but let's turn the engine back off. That's sort of what you sort of want to see, right? You see this, and then I decide to start pushing. Going for a queen trade, it didn't really bother me. Again, quite bad for me in a specific way, simply because if I go here, I have to give that up. But I would have gone here, and then I can protect that pawn, and attack that pawn at the same time. So that's the idea. That's why I decided to play queen to e7. Now my opponent captured, and after some captures, I saw that I capture right there. And yes, he can block, but I give a few more checks. I attack everything, and you can see quite interesting move. A6. Why did I play A6? Well, I didn't really see a breakthrough, and I did not want him to capture, so I decided to let him make a mistake first. And now what I do is I simply attack this rook right here. A very interesting move, because after this, I decide to attack the rook once again, and my opponent resigns because if he moves the rook, of course he loses it, and if he captures, it doesn't really matter because I still capture it as well. So that's the way he blundered the rook. What I would have done in this position right here, again, this is quite sketchy, but h4, h5 is still working, and you can see after something like this, he can go back, but you're completely winning, and your opponent is going to have a hard time. What Stockfish recommends here is apparently you play d rook to d7, attacking the queen, and after something like this, you push, they take, and you take this. Yeah, that's good, but again, maybe I would have also just captured here, because going for mate is a bit less probable here. So yeah, this is how you play a game at 96% accuracy. You have a solid opening repertoire, and especially when you catch your opponent out of the opening, and then stabilize your position, which it was equal here, and then capitalize on your opponent's mistake. That is the way you're going to win more games and improve and scale your elo consistently. So you see, tactics, do a bunch of tactics is going to help you improve at chess, of course, and this is the way that I manage to improve my position after capitalizing on your opponent's mistakes. And yeah, this is basically what I want you to do. If you want to play at 95% accuracy, don't blunder your pieces. That's number one. If you blunder your pieces, your accuracy has gone down. But of course, it's not always about accuracy. In some games, it's going to be highly tactical. Your opponent misses something, you miss a tactic, and you're going to blunder a piece, and your opponent's going to blunder a piece. That's what's going to happen at lower ratings, and that's what even happens at some of my games. I miss a tactic because it's very tactical, very complicated, and my opponent also misses the tactic and then blunders, and then I finally find the tactic, and yeah. That's what happens. And of course, chess has a very, very, very huge learning curve where it's going to be very, very difficult to improve and it's going to scale very, very, very flat. And at some point, you're going to improve. Of course, keep consistent. Always do your puzzles. You need to do them if you want to improve. And play many games, okay? See you next time.